Hey guys. Tonight we travel back to the velvet-curtained drawing rooms and gaslit parlors of the Victorian Iran age of rigid manners. Heavy skirts and hair. So much hair. Picture this. You're standing in front of a gilt-framed mirror. Taller than a horse, in a corset that's already pinching your lungs into submission. It's 6:42 a.m. The maids have barely lit the fire. And your day begins not with tea or toast, but with 18 inches of tangled hair screaming for attention. You probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a respectable lady in 1872, and your hair is both your crown and your curse. Whether you're living in a London townhouse or a rural manor in Shropshire, one universal truth binds you to the rest of Victorian womanhood. Society expects your hair to be long, healthy, and immaculate at all times, and if it isn't, well, prepare for a slow descent into whispered mockery, lower marriageability, and the occasional unsolicited pamphlet on Christian modesty. Your hair isn't just something growing from your scalp, it's a moral indicator, a social compass, a daily labor of love and agony. The average Victorian lady doesn't just comb and go. She tends to her hair like a prized rose garden, brushing, oiling, pinning, preserving every strand like gold. Some manuals from the era claim that a woman's character could be judged by the state of her partying, a crooked part, a crooked soul, perhaps. Too much pomade, clearly vain, not enough. Probably slipping toward pauperdom. It's worth noting that for Victorian women, hair length wasn't merely fashionable, it was essential. Think knee length, floor length, sometimes even train length hair, swishing behind you like a second petticoat. And before you ask, yes, people tripped on it. Yes, it got caught in carriage wheels. And yes, it often ended up being chopped off and turned into jewelry or a keepsake when you died. We'll get to that later. But let's talk about the why first. Why the obsession with long hair? In short, the Victorians were romantics. The ideal woman was imagined as a vision of purity, mystery, and domesticity, traits apparently best embodied by ankle-grazing curls and buns big enough to support minor architecture. Poets wrote verses about it. Painters immortalized it. Preachers moralized it. Hair became the canvas on which femininity was painted one strand at a time. Mainstream fact. The fashion magazines of the day, like the Englishwoman's Domestic magazine, dedicated entire sections to hair care tips. They featured how-tos on braiding, curling, and maintaining shine with products like bear grease and rosemary tinctures. Yes, bear grease. No, it didn't smell great. But here's your quirky tidbit. Some ladies didn't rely solely on their own hair. Oh no, they saved fallen strands in hair receivers. Tiny porcelain pots with holes on top, perched innocently on vanities. Over time, these collected hairs were rolled into pads called rats, which were used to bulk up hairstyles. The irony: your glorious bun might be made up partly of what fell off while brushing last week. Historians still argue whether this intense emphasis on hair was strictly about beauty, or whether it also played into deeper fears of change, gender roles, and the shifting class system. The Industrial Revolution had thrown everything into motion except, apparently, the idea that you could cut your hair short and still be respectable. So here you are, staring at your reflection, trying to figure out if your middle part makes you look more pious or pitiful. You reach for the brush. It's boar bristle, of course the finest. Recommended in household words. You start the 100-stroke ritual. Every tug through a knot feels like mild punishment for that time you giggled at your cousin's unchaperoned garden stroll. You wince. You yawn. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimes 7. This will take a while. Meanwhile, your hair continues to grow like ivy, creeping over the old stone walls of your ancestral estate. It's romantic. It's picturesque. It's exhausting. And yet, you wouldn't dream of cutting it. Not unless you were grieving, or rebelling, or both. You're still in front of the mirror, Still brushing. Stroke 73 now. Maybe 74. You've lost count somewhere. Between your second sigh and the moment a rogue strand whipped across your eye like a warning. The handle of your brush is warm in your palm, the bristles tinged with yesterday's pomade, and just a trace of last night's fireplace ash. You keep going. You have to. Because in Victorian society, skipping your hair routine was roughly equivalent to skipping church. Simply wasn't done. Welcome to the world of compulsive brushing, where 100 strokes a day wasn't just encouraged, it was doctrine. You've read about it in women's magazines, overheard it at tea, and had it lectured to you by your great-aunt Ethel, who claims her hair never split once in 72 years. Spoiler, it did. Everyone's did. But facts never got in the way of Victorian ideals. Daily brushing served many purposes, or at least claimed to. It was said to stimulate the scalp, distribute natural oils, remove dirt, and promote healthy shine. And while some of that holds water by modern standards, the sheer zeal with which it was done had more to do with moral discipline than dermatology. The idea was simple. If a woman could dedicate herself to maintaining her hair with patience, gentleness, and rigor, she was surely disciplined enough for all the other expectations foisted upon her: child-rearing, letter-writing, embroidery, and suppressing opinions at dinner. Your brush is more than a tool, it's a ritual object. Carved from ivory or fine wood, often with your initials, monogrammed in delicate scroll. Some were engraved with florals, others with birds, and if you were especially unlucky, inspirational verses about virtue and humility. Imagine trying to untangle a matted coil while reading, "Blessed is she who smooths with grace." Inspiring, or maddening, sometimes both. You glance over at your dressing table. Next to your brush is a small pot of macassar, oil, a sticky, fragrant concoction made of coconut oil, palm oil, and flowers, occasionally laced with opium or alcohol depending on who mixed it. The Victorians swore by it. They also ruined countless parlor chairs with it, leading to the invention of the antimacassar, those little doilies, draped over upholstery, to protect furniture from greasy heads. Mainstream fact. The habit of brushing 100 strokes a day wasn't just confined to the elite. Even middle-class women, without armies of servants, were taught to devote serious time to their tresses. Instructional books, like The Ladies' Toilet or Hints on the Hair, dictated daily routines with exhausting precision, including advice like brushing in for separate directions, and never ever letting your hair dry without first warming the room. You sigh again, rubbing your neck. It's already sore. Not because brushing is hard work, but because your hair is heavy. You've grown it since childhood, and though it looks glamorous to anyone who hasn't lived under it, the reality is different. Your scalp itches, your arms ache, and yet you persist, because that's what you're supposed to do. That's what all women do, at least the ones anyone pays attention to. Here's your quirky detail. Some women didn't trust themselves to brush properly, so they hired others to do it. Daughters brushed mothers. Sisters helped each other. In some cases, upper-class ladies employed ladies' maids solely for hair maintenance. Imagine sitting perfectly still for an hour while someone else methodically separates oils and arranges your hair into something resembling civilization. It sounds relaxing until you remember the pins. We'll get to those soon. Historians still argue whether the 100-stroke rule was truly about hair health, or simply another social mechanism to enforce discipline and femininity. After all, men didn't brush like this, not even close. But for women, unkempt hair could be read as evidence of moral failing, laziness, or even mental instability. The madwoman in the attic trope. Wild loose hair was her signature look. So you keep brushing. Stroke 86 now. The bristles catch on something near the nape of your neck, and you pause, wincing. It's probably another snarl caused by yesterday's bonnet strap. You try to tug it free gently, then less gently, and finally, with a sound somewhere between a grunt and a curse your governess definitely wouldn't approve of, the knot loosens. You look at the strand in the brush. It glimmers faintly in the low light. You've lost about 8 hairs so far this morning. That's not bad. You'll collect them later perhaps, in your hair receiver. Maybe someday they'll become a lovely rat for next season's style. The idea of saving your own hair for future fashion feels strange now, but entirely normal here. Just as you're considering whether to spritz a bit of lavender water onto your roots, you hear footsteps outside your chamber. Someone's coming to summon you to breakfast. You hurry the final strokes 97, 98, 99, 100 and set the brush down like a knight sheathing a sword. You did it. Another morning conquered. Your hair is momentarily smooth, glowing faintly with oil and effort. You glance at yourself. Not perfect, but socially acceptable. You can't show too much pride in your appearance, that would be vain. But show too little, and you're dismissed as unrefined. It's a tightrope walk, one hairpin at a time. And as you rise from your chair, already calculating how you'll keep your curls in place until dinner, you remind yourself that you'll have to do it all again tomorrow, and the day after. Until death, scandal, or scissors do you part. You've brushed, you've oiled, and now just when you think your hair ordeal is over, you enter the next battlefield. Pins, lots of them. Metal ones, bone ones, tortoiseshell, jet, and gutta percha. Long, short, U-shaped, straight like needles. There are hairpins for fixing, for lifting, for hiding, and for stabbing into your scalp in the name of beauty. You lift one now with tired fingers and prepare for war. Securing your hair isn't optional. Victorian styles tower and twist like sculptural topiary, and gravity is not your friend. Enter the army of hairpins, those deceptively delicate weapons, tucked discreetly in every lady's bun, braid, or braided bun braid. A finished Victorian hairstyle could require anywhere from 20 to 60 pins, depending on how elaborate the look and how much your hair tries to escape during the day. Some women carried extras on their person in a reticule, glove, or even slipped into their corset. Just in case, mainstream fact. There were actually published manuals, like The Art of Hairdressing, 1870s, that described in detail the placement of every pin for dozens of appropriate styles. The pompadour twist, the Apollo knot, the Grecian roll. Each one promised sophistication, elegance, and most importantly structural integrity. A hairstyle falling apart in public wasn't just embarrassing. It was a small social catastrophe. So you begin. You twist your hair into the first roll, slide a pin underneath. It slides back out. You sigh. You press it in again at a steeper angle, anchoring it with another. There's a rhythm to this, like constructing a tiny fortress with no visible doors. Every pin is an unseen stitch holding your identity together. The hairpins aren't just tools. They speak a secret language of effort and control. They represent the hands of other women tour ladies maid who knows exactly where to tuck the trickiest coil. Or your sister, who wordlessly reaches out mid-conversation to secure a stray lock behind your ear. Pins are trust. Pins are safety. Of course, they're also pain. You can't go a day without stabbing your own scalp at least once. That sudden, microscopic jab that makes your eyes water, but isn't quite worth undoing the whole structure. Sometimes, by dinner, your head feels like it's sprouting tiny iron thorns, but the finished look is lovely. Supposedly, here's your quirky bit. During high winds or sudden carriage rides, women often reported being hit in the neck or shoulder by dislodged pins from their own or someone else's hair. In fact, one anecdote from 1883 describes a lady who bowed too deeply at a garden party and released a pin volley, impressive enough to startle a passing pony. Historians still argue whether the growing complexity of Victorian hairstyles reflected an aspirational standard or a coded protest. Some interpret the endless styling and layers of reinforcement as symbolic of women's repression, beauty locked into place. Individual strands forcibly conformed into a socially acceptable whole. Others believe it was about artistry and way for women to control one thing in lives filled with rules, restrictions, and unwanted matchmaking. Either way, you continue building your masterpiece. You've finished the base twists and are adding curls to frame your face. These will have to hold through tea, garden walks, and several expressions of quiet surprise. You carefully insert pins to give a slight lift behind your ears, said to make the cheekbones look more refined. You do not question this. You never have. You step back and regard your reflection. The hairstyle is neat, balanced, elegant. You bend your head from side to side and listen. No jingling, no looseness. That's good. The last thing you need is a bun collapse during the minister's visit. You reach for your hat. It's a small one today, a feathered confection meant to sit at a rakish angle. Placing it over your pinned hair requires strategy. One pin too tight, and the hat won't sit flat. One too loose, and you'll spend the rest of the afternoon pretending you're not tilting dangerously to starboard. You adjust, secure it, with two long jet pins that pierce through your hair and hat band like stakes into the earth. They're perfect, probably. As you make your way downstairs, hair high and hat firm, you move carefully, like a cat with a book balanced on its head. You're not just protecting your style, you're protecting your dignity, your hours of effort, and your place in this carefully composed world. Downstairs, the parlor smells faintly of fresh roses and burnt toast. Your younger cousin is sitting by the fireplace, her hair in long, unruly waves. She's reading Byron upside down and doesn't notice you at first. You smile to yourself. She learned soon enough. For now, let her enjoy the freedom of hair. That doesn't require structural reinforcement, because for you, pins are part of life. They come out only at night, slowly, painfully, one at a time. And even then, they leave little ghosts behind teeny dents in your scalp, like polite reminders of the pressure you carried all day. But for now, they hold everything in place. And for now, that's enough. You descend the last stair with the elegance of a swan and the core attention of a gymnast holding a headstand. Your hair, encased in its cage of pins and oils and strategic hopes, stays mercifully in place. You enter the breakfast room, where the smell of eggs, polished wood, and freshly struck matches mingles in the air. But before your tea is even poured, the real morning performance begins. The breakfast hair ritual. Don't let the name fool you. It's not about styling hair over toast and jam. This is the social unveiling of your hair's final form, the true test of all your morning labor. You sit, you sip, and you listen to Aunt Eugenia remark how golden tones like yours are so very fashionable this year, which is Victorian for, thank goodness you didn't come down looking like a peasant. A soft chuckle here, a nod there. You play your part. The real performance isn't in your manners, it's in keeping that one rebellious lock near your temple from springing loose and joining your marmalade. You discreetly reach up to pat it, fingers finding the hidden pin like a practiced codebreaker. Mainstream fact: Victorian women didn't just style their hair privately. They often unveiled their full look at breakfast, especially in well-to-do homes. It wasn't uncommon for families and guests to gather with heads full of curled, glossed, and coiffed creations, sitting beneath chandeliers and portraits of long-deceased ancestors with similarly pinned expressions. Think of it as the earliest version of a runway, but with porridge. The oils used in the ritual varied widely. Some women swore by castor oil, others used bear grease, still a favorite. Disturbingly, while some preferred the gentler scent of almond or coconut, all were applied after brushing, then warmed gently by sitting near the fire or wrapping a towel briefly heated on the hearth. It gave the hair a smooth, reflective quality, shine that was prized and whispered about. Did you see her crown this morning? Practically radiant. Quirky tidbit. Some women, especially in the country or on cold mornings, would warm their brushes in a pan over coals before beginning the ritual. There are actual anecdotes of scorched hair and blistered palms, especially among younger women attempting to mimic the technique unsupervised. Fashion may be pain, but accidental singeing before breakfast is rather extreme. Even by Victorian standards, historians still debate whether the breakfast hair ritual was more about presentation to others, or a private act of self-possession. Was it pride in one's appearance? A subtle display of status? A practiced deception to hide the exhaustion of everything it took just to look naturally elegant? Probably a bit of all three. Meanwhile, your spoon clinks gently in your teacup. You steal a glance at your cousin across the table. Her hair is up in a soft twist, the result of two maids and an elder sister's fingers. It's lovely, though you notice a single strand sticking out just behind her ear. A soft rebellion, curling defiantly toward the scones. You smile faintly. Not worth mentioning now, but if it's still loose by luncheon, someone will say something. They always do. You reach for the toast. As you chew, you calculate the hours your hair must survive. 2 until the charity visit. 1 during the walk in the garden, 3 more for embroidery with the rector's wife, and at least 4 until dinner. You consider touching up your waves, with a bit of warm iron if the weather stays dry. If not, the bonnet will have to do the heavy lifting. And then there's your hat pin. You mentally remind yourself to check it again before stepping outside. Last week, it nearly dislodged, mid-curtsy, the horror. Your mother still hasn't stopped referring to it as the incident. You finish your tea, as the butler announces that the carriage will be ready in 20 minutes. You rise, nodding faintly, and catch a glimpse of yourself in the small mirror by the sideboard. Your hair shines, your curls hold. You appear composed, even serene. But behind that tranquil facade is a mind cataloging every strand, every pin, every potential weak spot that may give way under wind, humidity, or a poorly timed sneeze. You glide out of the room. Head high and spine stiff not from pride, but from sheer determination to keep the structure of your hairstyle intact. And all this, it's just the morning routine. You haven't even made it to the street yet. You step outside into the damp morning air, and immediately feel the familiar tingle of anxiety flutter behind your ears. The air smells of coal smoke, wet brick, and spring just humid enough to inspire fear in any woman with styled hair. You place a gloved hand over your temple protectively, as if shielding your thoughts, but in reality, you're gauging moisture levels. Humidity, after all, is the silent saboteur of even the most painstakingly constructed Victorian hairstyle. You're headed to town today, and the streets are a minefield, unpredictable gusts of wind, the occasional sudden downpour, and the looming threat of a child running past you with a stick, and a poor sense of spatial awareness. Your hat is pinned firmly in place, your bonnet strings tied with surgeon-like precision. And yet, there's a subtle dread lurking just beneath your confident stride. Public hair panic. It isn't only about vanity. If your hair collapses in public, it's like watching your reputation unravel strand by strand. A loosened coil may as well be a social leak. People will notice, and they'll pretend not to at first. Later, they'll whisper about how you looked rather windblown, or a bit disheveled, which in Victorian terms might as well mean, has she been drinking? Mainstream fact. Victorian women were expected to maintain pristine appearances, not just at home, but especially in public. A lady's hair was not to be touched when she left the house, let alone adjusted. Even in emergencies, like a surprise drizzle protocol, discouraged any display of panic. You simply had to ride it out, pretend it wasn't happening, and pray that your maid packed extra pins in your reticule. The horse-drawn carriage jolts as it turns a corner. You instinctively steady your head, not your balance, but your hair. You're trained for this. It's practically muscle memory now, this delicate tension in your neck, the awareness of every loop, twist, and pin on your scalp. It's not paranoia. Survival. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some women developed such intense fear of hair malfunction in public that they wrote to etiquette columns asking whether it was appropriate to carry collapsible parasols, not for sun, but for emergency concealment. One inventive lady claimed to have designed a hat with an interior compartment containing 3 pins, a small mirror, and a strip of ribbon. Victorian Batman, if you will. Historians still argue whether this intense public hair anxiety stemmed from fashion norms or deeper anxieties about female visibility. Was it really about looking tidier? About appearing in control, composed, emotionally regulated? After all, a woman with chaotic hair might be assumed to have a chaotic mind. And the Victorian world was not kind to women who appeared uncontent. The carriage arrives near the town square. You take a deep breath and perform the patented hair confidence check. Not touching, not adjusting, just mentally reviewing the morning's architecture. You step down with care, greeting Mrs. Dobbins at the apothecary with a smile so practiced it could serve tea. She, of course, comments on your lovely sheen today, and you respond with the proper amount of polite dismissal, secretly exhaling. In relief, you're holding together. So far then, it happens. A gust, from nowhere, a strong one. Your hat wobbles. Your hair shifts just slightly, but you feel it. Like a tectonic plate groaning under pressure. You stop mid-step, trying not to look like someone bracing for an invisible force. You hear a pin shift, a whisper of tension loosening. Your scalp tingles in betrayal. Do you run for cover? Do you duck into the milliner's shop and pretend to browse hatbands until the wind settles? No, you press forward. Dignity demands it. But, let's be honest, every step feels like your hair might unfurl like a roll of parchment. You move more slowly now, greeting people with fewer head tilts, fewer smiles. Motion, after all, can be dangerous. At any moment, a curled strand may escape and drape itself across your forehead like a wet string bean. You pray it doesn't happen. You promise your reflection in the bakery window that you'll be more careful. Tomorrow. This was the reality of daily life for many Victorian women. Their hair wasn't a passive accessory. It was a constant performance. In public, it became a silent contract between the self and society. I will present perfection, and in return, I will be left undisturbed. You finish your errands with minor victories, no major collapses, no flapping hair ribbons, and only one pin that fell discreetly into your glove while you weren't looking. You pocket it, nodding at fate. Not today, wind. Not today. Back in the carriage, as the town disappears. Behind you, you allow yourself a moment to slouch. A small reward. But only until you arrive home then, the hair must be assessed, corrected, and, if necessary, completely reassembled before dinner. Because in this world, your hair doesn't just reflect who you are, it decides how others see you, and that, dear listener, is the cost of going outside with hair that simply never ends. You've returned home, your boots slightly muddy, your gloves faintly scented with violets and pastry crumbs, and your neck sore from holding your head in that exact, socially correct angle for 3 straight hours. The house greets you with warmth and silence, your private domain once more. And now, finally, your mind turns to the next ordeal, preparing your hair for the night. Because even sleep in the Victorian era didn't mean freedom. Oh no. Long hair doesn't clock out when the sun goes down. If anything, it becomes needier in the quiet hours, more prone to knots, friction, and nocturnal rebellion. So begins the nighttime nest, a routine equal parts necessity, superstition, and domestic choreography. You sit once more before your vanity. The low flicker of gaslight, casting golden reflections in your mirror. Your hands are already moving, reaching for the pins, carefully, methodically, like disarming a booby trap. One by one, you remove them. Some come free easily, others snag slightly, and a few seem to have embedded themselves into your very soul. You wince once or twice, but never curse out loud. This is sacred work, mainstream fact. Victorian women had extensive nighttime hair routines. Once unpinned, the hair was brushed again often. Fewer strokes this time, but still enough to realign the strands, loosen any tension from the day, and restore circulation to the scalp. Some women believed this helped prevent headaches. Others saw it as a time of reflection, a few meditative moments where the only sound was the soft rasp of bristles and the occasional creak of the floorboards. You begin brushing, slowly, not the crisp, purposeful strokes of morning, but gentle arc sleepy motions. Your hair fans out over your shoulder like a shawl, a warm curtain that smells faintly of lavender and coal smoke. The knots come easier now, softened by the oil and the warmth of the day. Here's your quirky tidbit. Many women wrapped their hair in protective cloth, at night linen, or silk caps tied under the chin, or more fashionably embroidered sleeping bonnets, not just for modesty, but to prevent breakage, reduce tangling, and importantly keep hair oils off the pillowcases. Laundry, after all, was an ordeal, best avoided unless absolutely necessary. Your bonnet sits neatly folded beside your brush. It's pale blue, trimmed in faded lace, and has a soft, slightly musty scent that reminds you of lavender drawers and quiet Sundays. You gather your hair into a loose braid knot, too tight, never too tight. Tightness meant headaches, and besides, it was bad luck to sleep with your hair straining at the roots. Or so your grandmother insisted. Historians still argue whether that belief was a genuine superstition, or just something invented to get young girls to stop tugging their curls too tight. The braid complete. You slip the bonnet on, tying it beneath your chin with a bow. Not too firm comfort matters now. The weight of your hair rests gently down your back, and you tilt your head slowly from side to side, listening to how it moves, how it breathes. The sense of relief is strange. You've carried that elaborate style all day, and now it's undone, reconfigured into something soft, restful, and entirely private. No one will see this version of you. This is the you behind the curtain. The you outside of parlors and promenades and pin critiques. You rise from your vanity and cross to your bed. The mattress is high and firm, your nightgown already laid out, and the room dim but not dark. Before slipping between the sheets, you double-check that no stray pins remain hidden in the folds of your heron. Unpleasant surprise that many Victorian ladies encountered when a forgotten pin left a neat bruise on the temple by morning. Once in bed, you adjust your braid to rest behind your head, not under it. You turn slightly to the side, allowing the pillow to cradle both your thoughts and the weight of your carefully restrained tresses. The house quiets. Somewhere, a clock ticks faintly. Outside, a soft breeze nudges the curtain. You close your eyes and your mind drifts not quite asleep, not quite awake. You think about the strands you brushed loose today, the ones now resting in the hair receiver like whispered chapters of your day. You think about the weight of your hair, both literal and symbolic. It is a crown. It is a burden. It is a statement you never chose to make, but are expected to wear every hour, every season. Every glance from a stranger who sees only the gloss, never the effort. But here, now, in this hush, your hair is just hair tucked away, hidden beneath ribbons and linen, free of judgment. For a few quiet hours at least, it is no longer a performance, and that, somehow, is a comfort. Morning arrives again, as it always does, earlier than it should, and with a grayish light that creeps into your chamber like a nosy maid. You stir beneath your covers, your body still warm, but your mind already turning toward the ritual that awaits. Before your feet even touch the rug, you're aware of your braid, soft but slightly loosened, pressing against your back. It has survived the night. Mostly you rise and shuffle toward the vanity, still wrapped in your dressing gown. You untie your sleeping bonnet with the kind of care usually reserved for unwrapping delicate heirlooms. It slides off with a whisper, revealing the braid beneath flattened hair, a little frizzed there, but intact. A small victory before breakfast. Today's task will involve a bit more than brushing and pinning. You've decided, or perhaps society has decided for youth, it's time for a more elaborate style. A coiled crown, perhaps, or a full Victorian chignon, which is less of a hairstyle and more of a statement that you've got nothing but time, talent, and fingers like a clockmaker's apprentice. You begin with brushing, of course, always brushing. Long, slow strokes this time, to work out the sleep kinks. It's comforting in its way, this part of the ritual, repetitive calming. A little like whispering to yourself without speaking. As the hair falls loose across your back, you feel its weight return. The softness has a gravity to it now. You can feel it pulling down on your shoulders, your spine adjusting to the familiar burden. Mainstream fact. The average Victorian woman's hair could grow impressively long. Floor length was rare, but mid-back and beyond was common among the upper and middle classes. This was partly due to genetics, partly due to obsessive care, and partly because haircuts were seen as drastic, and often reserved for children, widows, or women recovering from illness. Most girls didn't even trim their ends, unless absolutely necessary. Scissors were not friends. And yes, that much hair gets heavy, unpleasantly so. Victorian diaries, letters, and even etiquette guides often mention women suffering from chronic neck and upper back discomfort, directly related to the sheer mass of their hair. A crown of femininity, they called it. But few crowns are light, and none of them are easy to sleep on. You know this pain. You've lived it. The long days when a misaligned bun pin digs so deep into your skull that it leaves a dent. The subtle ache at the base of your neck that builds with each hour of being upright. The pressure headaches that begin as a polite throb and end as full-blown spiritual crises. And yet, what choice do you have? Here's your quirky tidbit. Some women took to weighing their hair as a curiosity. There are anecdotes in women's periodicals from the 1880s of ladies reporting that their tresses, fully undone, weighed as much as 5 or 6 pounds. That's 2 pineapples. or one very large, very silent judgment from society. Historians still argue whether the beauty standard of such long hair was aspirational or oppressive. Did women truly love their long hair, or did they merely fear the repercussions of defying tradition? Was the long hair ideal tied to religious purity, or did it persist simply because no one dared start a countertrend? As you begin to twist your hair upward into today's chosen shape, a coiled halo that circles your head like a divine pastry, you feel the pull begin. Not just physical, but psychological. This style will hold, if you're lucky, until dinner. If not, you'll find yourself back here in a few hours, repinning while trying to keep an eye on the mantel clock and your temper dart. Your arms ache halfway through the process, not dramatically, just enough to remind you that elegance is rarely ergonomic. You pause, shake out your fingers, and resume. The coils take shape, slow and tight, and overlapping in delicate spirals. You anchor them with pins, carefully balanced for maximum security and minimum stabbing. Some women use rats, those soft pads of bundled hair saved from daily brushing, to bolster their style. You have a few tucked away, but today, you go natural. There's satisfaction in that, even if it means your halo sits a little lower than society might prefer. When the final pin goes in, there's silence. You stare at your reflection. The weight has returned. Not just the hair, but what it symbolizes. Discipline, control, tradition. You miss the feel of it hanging loose down your back. You miss the freedom of sleep. But now, it's daytime. And in the daytime, hair is performance. You dab your temples with rosewater. You straighten the edge of your dressing gown. And you prepare, once again, to descend the stairs, looking like nothing hurts. Nothing pulls, nothing weighs you down. Even though it does, every single day. You descend the stairs slowly today, not because you're tired, though you are, but because each step jostles the crown of coiled hair on your head like a tower built on teacups. You've outdone yourself this morning. The halo is perfect, symmetrically twisted, gently gleaming, not a single hair out of place. And yet, all you can think about is how much it weighs. Your neck has developed a sixth sense, one that detects when a pin is 30 seconds away from giving up. Your shoulders are already stiff from the delicate strain of balancing beauty with gravity. There's a saying in your family, elegance is quiet effort. You're beginning to suspect it was coined by someone who never had to wear pins and a halo of hair while climbing stairs. You reach the drawing room where your mother and her friend, Lady Halcombe, are taking tea. The moment you enter, you feel their eyes sweep you. Not rudely, not even critically, just observationally. The unspoken rules of Victorian femininity dictate that a lady's entrance is her silent resume, posture, expression, dress, and most of all her hair. You sit carefully, smoothing your skirts and angling your head just so, to preserve the integrity of the twist. They complement your style, and you deflect graciously, as always. Oh, just something simple, you say, as if you hadn't spent 20 minutes wrestling it into shape, with your arms numb and your scalp sighing in despair. Mainstream fact: in upper-class Victorian households, a lady's hair was often considered part of her conversational arsenal. Compliments and remarks about hair served as a form of polite currency, a way to fill awkward silences or subtly show status. What a clever braid might mean who did it for you. Or do you even have a maid? It's a skill, reading these statements for what they really mean. Your mother, for example, has mastered the art of complimenting hair, while simultaneously suggesting it's slightly too fashionable for a Tuesday. Lady Halcombe, meanwhile, has pinned her own graying locks in a conservative cluster that hasn't changed since the Crimean War. You offer both women soft smiles and carefully neutral praise, and here's your quirky tidbit. Some women, fearing their maids might not be fully up to the task of Victorian hair artistry, actually sent their hair out to be styled. Yes, really. There were professional hairdressers, often men, who would visit households or receive carefully packed buns and braids for formal events. One 1875 article notes that a Mrs. L sent her wedding hairstyle by post to be assembled overnight. That's dedication. Or perhaps madness. Historians still argue whether these elaborate social rituals were empowering, allowing women to navigate society through fashion and finessure, whether they were just another web of restrictions dressed in lace and lavender water. Probably both. The line between expression and expectation has always been thin, especially when hair is involved. Lady Halcombe offers a theory about a neighbor's failed engagement. She wore her hair too forward on the brow, she says with an air of certainty, as if follicular geography determined marital success. You murmur agreement, biting back the observation that the poor girl also had a father, deep in debt, and a laugh like a goose. But no one mentions those things. Easier to blame the bangs. After tea, you excuse yourself for a walk in the garden. Outside, the breeze is light, the sky a color that only exists in watercolor paintings. You keep to the gravel paths not because of your shoes, but to avoid leaning into the wind. Your coiled halo isn't just ornamental, after all. It's a structure with tension points and weak spots, like an over-engineered greenhouse. And yet, as you pass the blooming clematis and the heavy-headed roses, you catch your reflection in a garden mirror placed, no doubt, by a clever landscaper who understood the vanity of afternoon promenades. You look poised, elegant, elevated. You look, in short, exactly as the world expects you to. And that moment, brief and bright and fragile as a soap bubble, almost makes it worth it. But only almost, because as you turn, you feel the faintest twinge. Near the back of your scalp, a signal. One pin has shifted. And now begins the countdown. You will smile and stroll and carry conversation for the next hour, as if you're not completely aware that something inside your hairstyle is slipping like a cart on a muddy hill. And that, dear listener, is the hidden art of being a Victorian woman, not just creating beauty, but concealing the burden beneath it. You don't panic. You've been here before. The quiet betrayal of a single pin. It starts with a barely there tug, just behind your right ear, nothing visible. Not yet, but you know it's the kind of shift that will cascade if you ignore it. And in Victorian society, ignoring a hair emergency is like ignoring a teacup slowly sliding off a table. Disaster delayed is not disaster avoided. You continue walking through the garden, head held high, steps deliberate. You pass under the stone archway twined with honeysuckle. The scent is heavy and sweet, almost cloying, like the perfume some debutantes wear when they think more is better. You inhale through your nose, exhale slowly, and keep your hands firmly at your sides. You will not touch your hair in public. You are not that woman. Mainstream fact. Touching your hair in Victorian public settings was frowned upon, and lest you were actively adjusting a hat or bonnet string. And even then, it had to be done with the grace of a silent actress on stage. A woman lifting her hand to the back of her head was a sign of vanity, of distress, or of poor training. That's what finishing schools were for. Not to teach you how to style, but how to endure a style gone wrong without flinching. The garden bench offers sanctuary. You lower yourself slowly, every motion practiced, and tilt your head back, just enough to allow gravity to help. Sometimes, a shifted pin settles itself, if you hold still. You count slowly. 1, 2, 3. No dice. That pin has gone rogue, and it's taken a small section of your halo with it. Not enough to collapse, but enough to humiliate. You sit very still. Here's your quirky tidbit. There were entire chapters in 19th century etiquette books devoted to the emergency restoration of personal appearance. They offered guidance on what to do if a glove split, a hem tore, or, yes, a hairstyle began to unwind. Advice included retreating to the powder room, feigning a headache, or most delicately saying you had something in your eye to justify. Touching your face, anything but admitting the truth. Your elaborate shell of normalcy was fracturing. You consider your options. You could excuse yourself from the walk and return to your room, but that would require an explanation. You could attempt to repin discreetly here on the bench, but your gloves are tight and your movements would attract attention. Or, you could do what you've been trained to do since your hair first reached your elbows, manage it with dignity and denial. Historians still argue whether Victorian fashion rituals were meant to elevate or to repress. Hair in particular occupies that strange space between identity and obligation. Long hair was revered, even fetishized in art and poetry, but controlling it was essential. A woman with her hair in disarray was a figure of madness, grief, or wildness. Think Ophelia in the water. Think Miss Havisham in her dust. Think of every cautionary tale where the heroine unravels literally. You're not about to unravel, not in public, not in the garden, not in front of the clematis. So you sit with poise. You summon an expression of tranquil reflection. Perhaps someone watching will think you are contemplating a letter, a suitor, or a poem by Tennyson. No one will know that all you're really thinking is, please, just hold until I reach the house. The pin holds. Or at least, the rest of your hair decides to cooperate for now. You rise and return toward the drawing room, still graceful, still serene. But inside, your scalp burns with that specific itch of a hairstyle slowly digesting itself. You reach your room at last. You close the door, exhale, and finally reach up with both hands to find the source of the problem. It's worse than you thought. One of the anchoring pins has bent, not fallen out. Bent, it has been digging gently into your skull. For the last 20 minutes, like a very determined mosquito with a steel proboscis. You extract it carefully, wincing. It's hot. Your head pulses faintly from the pressure. But you don't collapse. You don't weep. You simply begin the familiar process of triage. Loosen the crown gently. Rewrap the base coil. Secure with a fresh pin from the velvet-lined box in your top drawer. This isn't vanity. This is maintenance. Like tightening the bolts on a suspension bridge. You don't do it for fun. You do it because collapse is not an option. In the mirror, your reflection returns to order. A little looser, a little wiser. You smooth your hands over your scalp, then step back. The structure holds, because you, like your hair, may bend, but you do not break. The afternoon stretches ahead like a politely endless parlor. Conversation, comfortable, slow, and full of hidden hazards. Now that your hair has been repaired, and the crisis averted, you face the next challenge with all the calm of a general. Heading into a second skirmish. Surviving an entire social visit without disturbing a single coil. Today's guest is Miss Clara Wexley. Your cousin twice removed, bars depending on which branch of the family tree you choose to acknowledge. She arrives in a flutter of carriage lace, parasol twirls, and the faint scent of burgundy. Her hair, as always, is perfectly puffed and pinned, forming an intricate pattern of loops and soft volume that seems to defy physics. You suspect the use of false hair, or witchcraft. You both settle into the drawing room, exchanging compliments, and careful observations about the weather, local lilies, and that one unfortunate scandal involving the vicar's niece and a very poorly chosen hat ribbon. But beneath the calm social surface, a subtler conversation is happening between hairstyles. Who has more height, more volume, more subtle fringe? Whose hair can endure the longest without flinching? Mainstream fact. Victorian women often judged each other not by wealth, or width though those mattered too, but by presentation and hair. More than fashion or jewelry offered the clearest window into one's social discipline. Too plain, and you were thought careless. Too ornate, and you risked appearing vain or even vulgar. A perfect middle ground was the gold standard, elaborate enough to signal refinement, but understated enough to suggest it took no effort at all. A lie, of course. It always took effort. You listen politely as Clara discusses her new silk fan, and how her maid managed to twist her braid into something called the Dresden loop. You nod in admiration, resisting the urge to feel your own twist for signs of sagging. You won't be caught adjusting it, not here, not now. Victorian drawing rooms were where reputations were made, and more importantly, where hairstyles went, to die under the weight of polite expectation. Quirky tidbit. Some women during this era began sleeping upright, not just to preserve complex styles for multiple days, but also to prevent nighttime oils from undoing hours of pinning. Diaries from the 1860s contain accounts of young women propping themselves with extra pillows, or even sitting in special beauty chairs to keep the shape of their braids intact overnight. Sleep, apparently, was for the structurally lazy. Historians still argue whether this level of hair maintenance was a product of competitive social environments or a reflection of deeper cultural insecurities. Was it about women asserting control? in a world with few outlets or simply about meeting ever-shifting expectations. Some believe elaborate hairstyles were one of the few domains where Victorian women could express artistry and authority. Others think they were just another gilded cage, trimmed with ringlets. Clara leans forward to admire your hair. Is that your own? She asks with the wide-eyed innocence of someone who absolutely knows the answer and is testing your honesty. You smile. Of course, you say. And it's truth, though you sometimes use a modest rat for volume. Everyone does. It's not deception. It's tradition. She nods, impressed or pretending to be. Either way, you both understand the rules. No woman here will admit to the bundle of saved hair stuffed in a dressing table drawer, carefully tied, with a satin ribbon. No one will confess to the small burns earned by leaning too close to the iron to get the perfect wave. It's all part of the game. Eventually, tea is served. Tiny sandwiches arrive, and you're forced to navigate sipping from a delicate china cup without letting the steam frizz your temples. It's a test of restraint. Your curls must not wilt. Your fringe must not retreat. You angle your cup slightly, sipping sideways like a lady preparing for portraiture. Clara does the same. The performance continues, and here, as you chew a cucumber sandwich with strategic elegance, comes another challenge, the urge to scratch. There's a faint itch, right at the crown where two pins cross like dueling sabers. You feel it growing, blooming slowly into the kind of irritation that cannot be ignored. But you must ignore it. You must. Because you know what happens too. The woman who touches her hair during tea. One gentle scratch becomes a minor adjustment. It leads to a loose curl, a visible pin, and soon someone's asking if you're feeling quite well. You might as well stand and declare you're abandoning civilization to live in the woods, with your hair completely down so you do nothing. You sip, you smile. You lean slightly away from the fireplace to avoid the heat curling your edges. The itch fades. This is what victory feels like. As Clara rises to leave, she offers one last glance at your hairstyle. You always look so polished, she says. And this time, there's no double meaning, no veiled barb. It's a rare, genuine compliment delivered woman to woman, not rival to rival. You see her out, nodding to the butler, and return to the drawing room with quiet satisfaction. The mirror by the mantel confirms it. Your halo held. Not a strand out of place. And in a world that expects you to be composed, unshaken, and aesthetically indestructible, that counts as triumph. Section 11. The drawing room is quiet again, save for the tick of the clock and the faint rustle of curtains stirred by the gentlest of afternoon breezes. You lean back against the tufted velvet settee, your spine straight, not by choice, but by the corset's persistent memory, and allow yourself a moment of stillness. The visit with Clara is over. Your teacup has been returned to its saucer without incident, and your hair miraculously remains pristine. But the day isn't done yet. Soon, you'll be expected to make an appearance in the music room, where your younger sister is practicing a piece that sounds like a drowning metronome. And after that, there's embroidery with your aunt, whose conversational style is 1 part gossip, 2 parts passive judgment. Neither is particularly taxing, unless you count the endurance required to smile politely while stitching the world's most pointless handkerchief. But both require one thing, hair that behaves, so you rise carefully, like a statue deciding to be human for a few minutes. Your head feels slightly heavier than it did this morning. That's no illusion. Throughout the day, your hairstyle has absorbed the weight of wind, humidity, and gravity. You feel each pin more clearly now, like pressure points, charting a private map of pain across your scalp. Mainstream fact. Many Victorian women reported hair fatigue in their diaries, though they didn't call it that, of course. They described scalp tension, aching behind the ears, and a heaviness that worsens near sunset. Some even visited physicians, who prescribed things like aromatic scalp tonics, head massages, or, in more dramatic cases, the removal of pins for short periods of airing. Imagine needing a medical excuse just to breathe through your own hair. You reach your room before the embroidery session to perform a quiet ritual, the midday adjustment. You're not supposed to need it, but everyone does it alone, in secret, with the curtains drawn and the door latched. You sit before the mirror again, this time not to impress, or present, but to survive. First, you remove the topmost decorative pins, just 2, maybe 3. Enough to relieve the pull without undoing the structure. Your scalp size. Not literally, of course, but that's what it feels like. You take a soft brush and smooth the outer layer of your twist, reshaping it, ever so slightly. Then you add a touch of pomade to the flyaways near your temples, those little traitorous hairs that seem to escape no matter what you do. Quirky tidbit. Victorian women had a whole arsenal of hair fixers. Beeswax for flyaways, soap shavings mixed with rosewater to tame baby hairs, and even, brace yourself, a combination of egg whites and crushed pearl powder for special occasions. The egg white stiffened the hair, while the pearl added a ghostly shimmer. Useful. Debatable, messy. Absolutely. Once your hair has been gently coerced back into position, you reinsert the pins with renewed confidence. It's like reinforcing a fortress wall. Your eyes meet your reflection, and for the briefest of moments, you feel invincible again. Not because your hair looks good, already did, but because you've restored control. Historians still argue whether this constant maintenance gave Victorian women a sense of power or imprisonment. On one hand, the daily ritual of hair care allowed for moments of solitude, introspection, and even pride. On the other hand, the obligation to appear undone with effort created a level of pressure that modern salons wouldn't dream of replicating. It was art, but art under surveillance. You return downstairs and take your place in the embroidery circle. The room is stuffy, the windows just slightly ajar. Your aunt is already holding a hoop, murmuring about her stitches, and the conversation quickly veers toward local engagements and the color of Mrs. Tithering's new shawl. You nod where appropriate. You stitch mindlessly. And all the while your hair holds. It's remarkable, really, how something as intangible as hair can dictate the terms of your entire day. Your mood, your movement, your posture, it's all dictated by the structure on your scalp. And yet, you're expected never to speak of it. Not seriously, at least. The occasional joke, sure. A whispered complaint to a friend. But the true reality, the planning, the aching, the vigilance is a silent labor. You glance at your younger cousin across the room. Her hair is still short, only just brushing her shoulders, pinned in the back with a single bow. She's fidgeting, poking her needle through the fabric with bored irritation. She catches your eye and scowls. She doesn't know what's coming, and you don't tell her, not yet, because in a few years she'll find out. When her hair reaches the tipping point, when it stops being just something on her head and becomes a daily architectural feat, she understand. She hold a box of pins in one hand and a brush in the other, and she look in the mirror and whisper the same thing you whispered at 16. So this is what they meant. You make it through embroidery with your hair, your patience, and your polite smile all still intact, though each is beginning to fray at the edges. The house is quiet, now afternoon, fading into that peculiar golden hour when everything feels suspended, as if the world itself is pausing to catch its breath. You retreat, at last, to your favorite refuge, the upstairs window seat, overlooking the garden. It's the one place where no one expects you to be perfectly composed. You sit sideways, one leg tucked under, the other stretched toward the sash, and rest your cheek against the cool pane of glass. Outside, the late sun spills across the hedges and rose bushes like honey, the light slanting just enough to reveal dust in the air, dancing like secret particles. And still, even here, you are acutely aware of your hair. It presses gently against the back of your head. A quiet but persistent reminder that the day's style is not yet over. The pins haven't loosened. Not exactly, but there's a low-grade hum in your scalp now, like a tiny violin vibrating just beneath your skin. A tension you carry not because you want to, but because letting it go would mean undoing hours of effort. And worse, setting a dangerous precedent. If you give in now, what message does that send to your reflection tomorrow morning? Mainstream fact. For many Victorian women, the act of maintaining a hairstyle was directly tied to one's sense of duty and identity. Loose hair was for children, for illness, or for moments of private grief. To wear it freely in the daylight hours, bound and unpinned, was unthinkable. Even housemaids, despite their physically demanding work, were expected to keep their hair securely braided or coiled. It wasn't just a matter of hygiene. It was a visual contract with society. You glance down at the garden, where one of the younger girls is skipping rope, her short curls bouncing in the breeze. She's too young yet for the rituals. Her hair is a frothy halo of freedom, no pins, no plan. Just motion and sunshine and the kind of innocence that doesn't yet know what it will cost to keep a coil from slipping. And here's your quirky tidbit. Among some Victorian circles, there were very particular beliefs about when a girl's hair should graduate. Age 12 was considered the turning point in many households, the moment when ribbons were replaced by pins, play gave way to posture, and bedtime brushing transformed from a soothing ritual into a nightly labor. Some families even held small ceremonies, symbolic or formal, to mark this transition. An early and oddly specific kind of follicular coming of age. Historians still argue whether these transitions were intended to prepare girls for womanhood, or simply to induct them into a system of unspoken performance. The braid became a badge, the bun became a burden, and the longer the hair, the greater the responsibility attached to it. You shift slightly on the window seat, adjusting the loose fabric of your sleeve. The motion tugs ever so gently on a coil pinned near the base of your skull. You wince not because it hurts, but because it's just one more reminder that even in your quietest moment, the maintenance never truly ends. There's a basket beside you filled with ribbons, old combs, scraps of lace, and a few hair pieces long forgotten. You pick one up absently, running your fingers over its texture. It's your own hair, from months past, brushed out, collected, twisted into a little bundle for later use. Victorian hair rats, they're called, though the name is far less elegant than the practice. These pieces were tucked into buns to give volume, or used to reshape collapsing curls. Your hair, helping your hair. Like a silent sisterhood of strands, you tuck it back in the basket and smile faintly. Every woman has a little secret like this, something hidden in a drawer or a pouch, just in case the style of the day becomes too much. A plan B made of protein and memory. The breeze shifts. You feel the tiniest strand of hair, just one, escape from your temple and fall forward against your cheek. It's light as air, barely there, but you feel it. Of course you do. You could fix it now, reach up, smooth it back, pin it down, but, instead, you leave it, just for a moment. Just to feel something out of place and let it be. Because sometimes, even in the Victorian world of precision and poise, a single stray hair is the most human thing of all. As the sun leans lazily into the horizon and the shadows lengthen across the parlor rugs, a soft knock comes at your bedroom door. It's your maid, of course, arriving not with any sense of urgency, but with the calm punctuality of someone who knows your schedule better than you do. She carries the silver-backed brush set, freshly polished, and a small bottle of your favorite hair oil, which smells of orange blossom and memories you can't quite place. You nod to her, wordlessly agreeing that it's time, not for bed, not yet, but for the twilight ritual, the soft undoing of the day's architecture. It's not a dramatic gesture. No cinematic hair shaking or reckless unraveling. It's deliberate, almost reverent, like peeling back the layers of your own performance. You sit before the mirror, and she stands behind you, fingers deft from years of practice. The pins are removed one by one, each placed with a tiny click into the velvet-lined tray. Some are warm from the long day, others slightly bent from their unseen battle with your scalp. She says nothing. She doesn't have to. In this quiet hour, she knows better than anyone that your hair tells the story of the whole day. Mainstream fact. In many Victorian households, particularly those of the upper and middle classes, this part of the evening when a maid undid her mistress's hair was not just a task, but a kind of quiet companionship. It was one of the few intimate acts that persisted through nearly every season and circumstance. A brush passed through hair 100 times was as much a gesture of trust as it was of care. Your hair now free falls with a soft weight onto your shoulders. You exhale, unaware until now that you'd been holding your breath all afternoon. The ache in your neck fades slightly, like a ringing bell finally muffled. She begins to brush, slow and rhythmic, from root to tip. The bristles tug gently at the tangled memories of the day. Each stroke is a sentence of silence, a lullaby for your scalp. You don't look in the mirror. Not now. You close your eyes and let the familiar repetition pull you toward stillness. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Victorian women swore by brushing their hair exactly 100 times each night, convinced it stimulated the scalp and encouraged faster growth. Whether there's science behind it or not is debatable, but what isn't up for debate is the sheer discipline it took. 100 strokes, counted mentally or whispered aloud. A kind of nightly rosary made of keratin and patience. Historians still argue whether this insistence on hair rituals was merely habit, or whether it filled a deeper psychological need. In a world where so little was in women's control, education, finances, and futures were often directed by others' hair, became a personal territory, a place to assert routine, choice, and care. Even when everything else was prescribed. As the brushing continues, your mind begins to drift. You think of moments when your hair betrayed you, a twist that unraveled during a funeral, a curl that frizzed at your own engagement announcement, a pin that bounced off the ballroom floor during a dance and was scooped up by a handsome guest with far too much curiosity. Your hair has been both friend and saboteur. It has outlasted seasons, opinions, and even lovers. The brushing slows. She parts your hair gently and massages a few drops of oil into your scalp. The scent rises around you. Warm citrus, slight spice, a hint of clean linen. It smells like safety. Like a return to yourself. You open your eyes, glance at the mirror. What you see is not a woman in performance. Not someone poised or polished. Just a version of yourself that exists between stages, between the expectations of morning and the escape of sleep. Hair loose, face soft, honest. You murmur your thanks, and your maid gives a quiet nod before slipping from the room. The brush tray remains on the vanity. The oil bottle is capped. The pins rest like tiny soldiers, retired from duty. You are alone again, and for the first time all day. Your head feels light. You reach up and run your own fingers through your hair now. Not to tame it, not to style it. Just to feel the strands drift between your knuckles, each one a thread in the long tapestry of your daily life. Your hair tired, fragrant, loyal is finally at rest, and so are you. Evening deepens around you like warm silk. The gas lamps downstairs hiss softly, casting long golden shadows that flicker across the wallpaper and make the portraits on the walls seem just slightly more alive. From somewhere in the house, the muffled clink of a decanter lid and the low hum of a gentleman's voice reminds you that the men are likely gathered in the library, talking politics over port. Not your concern. Not your world. You, on the other hand, are about to engage in something far more personal, far more enduring than parliamentary debates. The nighttime preservation of your hair. Yes, because, even though it has been unpinned, brushed, and anointed with oil, your hair still requires care before bed, letting it run wild on the pillow. Never. That's a recipe for snarls, split ends, and scandal. No, now begins the quiet preparation for sleep, and you perform it like a liturgy you've known since childhood. Mainstream fact. Victorian women never truly let their hair just be. Even in sleep, there were rules. Depending on length and texture, hair was either braided loosely or divided and wrapped in soft cloth to prevent breakage. And always, it was covered bonnets, caps, or knotted kerchiefs helped keep oil off the linens and order in the strands. A bare-haired sleep was something reserved for children, the sick, or rebellious novels. Tonight, you choose a simple braid, thick, three-parted, and low at the nape. You sit on the edge of your bed, your hands working in a rhythm older than memory. Left over right, right over center, center under left, over, under, under until the length of your hair becomes one single, living thing. A rope made of days. You tie it gently with a silk ribbon, not too tight, just enough to hold through the night. You run your hands down the braid, pressing out the last bits of air, as if sealing a letter to yourself for morning. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some Victorian women went even further. They would sprinkle lavender or violet powder into their braids before bed, not for perfume, but for hair health. Others tied charms or tiny fabric pouches with herbs into their nighttime plaits, convinced these protected against nightmares, illness, or thinning. Hair superstition, after all, was as old as hair itself. Historians still argue whether this meticulous bedtime grooming was more about hygiene or habit, or whether it gave women a rare sliver of control in lives shaped by ceremony and societal script. Was it just maintenance, or something more sacred? The answer, like a well-braided plate, is layered. Once your braid is finished, you reach for your sleeping bonnet. It's simple, white, muslin, carefully starched, but soft with years of use, trimmed with a ruffle so modest it barely qualifies as decorative. You slide it on, adjusting it just so at the temples, and tie the ribbon beneath your chin with a bow that somehow always takes 2 tries. There contained, safe, secure, you catch sight of yourself in the dressing mirror. Not the poised young woman from this morning, with her halo of coiled precision. Not the smiling figure who survived Clara's visit without losing her fringe. This is a different version of you, soft, shadowed, gently absurd in your ruffled cap and floor-length braid, but no less real. In fact, perhaps more so, because this version of you doesn't have to endure. She gets to rest. You slip under the covers, the braid falling comfortably along your spine. The pillow is cool against your cheek, and the bonnet rustles faintly as you settle in. Your body sinks, heavy with the kind of fatigue that only arrives after a day lived entirely in posture and restraint. As your eyes close, you think just briefly about all the women before you who have gone through these same motions. Generations of fingers braiding in twilight, of hair oil dabbed with a whispered sigh, of bonnets tied beneath weary chins. You are part of something larger, a lineage made of hair and habit and hidden labor. And perhaps, if you sleep very still, tonight, tomorrow, your hair will wake up as obedient as it is now. But you know better than to expect miracles. You awaken not with a jolt, but with that soft confusion particular to mornings when the body rises before the mind. The world is still quiet, pale light filtering in through the muslin curtains, brushing the edge of your bureau like a thought. You lie there for a few moments, eyes not quite open, cheeks still pressed to the pillow. Bonnet slightly askew, but miraculously still in place. The braid down your back is warm, slightly flattened, and carrying the weight of sleep. You can feel where it tugged lightly against your scalp in the night, not unkindly, but just enough to let you know, yes, I've been here, and no, I didn't unravel. You sit up slowly, the cotton of your nightdress crinkling softly around your knees. For a brief, glorious moment, your hair is just your hair, not performance, not pressure, not the subject of scrutiny, or compliments, or comparison. It's simply there, with you, before the day arrives, to turn it into a thing to be displayed. Again, mainstream fact. Victorian mornings for women began with very structured personal routines. Before even stepping into corsets or day dresses, the first order of business was grooming hair, chief among them. A proper lady might spend up to 40 minutes tending her hair before breakfast, especially if she didn't have a maid to assist. This wasn't just about vanity. It was foundational. Part of presenting one's discipline and self-respect. You untie the ribbon and begin to unravel the braid. Slowly, section by section, you separate the strands, careful not to tug. It's here that the true labor begins, detangling sleep from memory, smoothing away the creases of the previous day. The mirror greets you again, slightly fogged, slightly kinder in the morning light. You examine your reflection with the quiet honesty of someone seeing not the result, but the raw material. Your hair looks longer today. It always does in the morning, doesn't it? As if the hours of dreaming have stretched it just a little further, toward myth. Here's your quirky tidbit. There were popular hair diaries among young Victorian women, small, handwritten ledgers where girls recorded the progress of their hair growth in pencil or ink. Dates, measurements, even emotional notes. April 4th, 2 inches past collar. June 1st, washed with egg and beer, felt thicker. These weren't scientific experiments. They were part of a quiet, personal quest, almost a spiritual pursuit. Growing one's hair was not just physical, it was symbolic. A long braid wasn't just style, it was legacy. Historians still argue whether the emphasis on long, well-kept hair was a tool of feminine agency, or yet another form of restriction imposed by the male gaze and societal control. But here, in your room, barefoot and bonnet-free, you find the question doesn't matter quite as much. Right now, your hair is yours. And that, for the moment, is enough. You reach for the comb wide-toothed, made of bone, softened from years of use. You start from the bottom, gently working your way up, easing apart whatever little knots the braid failed to prevent. You hum, softly, not a song, just a shape of sound, something to keep you company. As you comb, you think about today, about what style you'll attempt. You weigh your choices not just in terms of beauty, but in strategy. Will the weather hold? Will you be sitting long or walking much? Will Clara visit again? Is it worth attempting the figure-8 twist with the side plaits, or should you default to the crown coil that holds better in wind? These are the calculations Victorian women make before breakfast. Not because anyone tells you to, but because the unspoken laws of appearance are etched into the fabric of your life. And if you can start the day with your hair aligned, there's a chance everything else might fall into place. 2. You set the comb down, run your hands through your hair once more, just to feel the smoothness, just to claim a moment before the world intrudes. Then, from the dressing table drawer, you take out the first pin. The day begins. Pin in hand, you pause for a moment, hovering at the edge of commitment. Because once the first pin goes in, you know there's no turning back. The transformation begins not just of your hair, but of your entire bearing, your posture, your poise. It's like slipping on armor, only softer, quieter, and infinitely more finicky, and infinitely more judged. You begin, as always, with the center part. You run the tail of your comb from your forehead to the crown of your scalp, creating 2 even wings of hair, like curtains drawn apart for the morning stage. From here, you section off the side tendrils and begin to coil them gently back, twisting them toward your ears and pinning them just behind the lobes. It's a gesture that feels half mechanical, half devotional, like lighting a candle, like reciting a prayer. Mainstream fact. The center part wasn't just fashion, it was a cultural code. Victorian modesty and morality favored symmetry and simplicity in hair. The center part signified order, control, and a sense of calm femininity. Side parts, by contrast, were sometimes associated with foreign fashions, actresses, or even loose behavior, though that line of thinking was always whispered, never shouted. Once the sides are secured, you gather the back. It's long now, thick and faintly wavy from the night braid, a texture that resists easy containment. You divide it in 2. Then 3. Begin the long process of braiding it upward, French style, close to your scalp. Your arms ache by the 3rd crossover, but you don't stop. You never do. By the time you pin the braid flat to your head in a low coil, you've already climbed the steepest hill of the day. The pins go in 4 to anchor the base, 3 to lock the middle, 2 curved ones to secure the crown. You add a final pin for luck. Not because you're superstitious, of course, just experienced. And here's your quirky tidbit. Many Victorian women had a lucky pin. Not in the sense of lottery tickets or love charms, but a particular pin, usually older or slightly bent, that had always held their hair just right. Losing it was considered bad fortune. Finding it again in the folds of a shawl or under a pillow was cause for private celebration. Entire mornings were derailed because of a missing pin. Some women swore they worked better than prayers. Historians still argue whether these morning hair rituals empowered or exhausted their participants. Some claim the consistency of hair care gave Victorian women a kind of meditative rhythm that helped organize chaotic lives. Others argue it was simply another burden layered atop corsets, silence, and polite expectations. Was it beauty, or was it survival? Was it both? You look in the mirror now. The style is secure, not flashy, not meek. The kind of hairstyle that says, I am trying, but not too hard. I am prepared, but not showy. I am, in essence, correct. That's the goal, most mornings. Not glamour, not innovation. Just correctness, an aesthetic form of social camouflage. You select a modest comb tortoiseshell, with a delicate curve and slide it just above your left temple. Not because it's needed, but because it completes the illusion of effortlessness, and it adds balance. Balance is everything. Outside your door, you hear footsteps. The house is stirring. Breakfast will be served soon. You rise from your stool, smooth your skirts, and feel your head adjust to the weight of the style knot. Heavy, exactly, but present. Like a thought you must carry all day. You pass the mirror once more before leaving. You don't linger. Just a glance, just enough to check for stray strands. For signs of rebellion, none today. You walk down the stairs slowly, each step a study in grace. And as you descend, the braid anchored to your scalp reminds you of who you're expected to be. Each pin a tiny whisper. Each twist a silent vow. This is what it means to begin a day as a Victorian. Lady Dot, not with a speech, not with a song, but with a hairstyle that holds. The breakfast room is bathed in soft morning light, filtered through lace curtains and warmed by the faint scent of toast and marmalade. You step in with quiet precision, every movement calculated to preserve not only your hairstyle, but the delicate illusion that you've slept like an angel and risen effortlessly charming. Of course, neither is true. But in Victorian society, effort was not meant to be seen, it was meant to shimmer just beneath the surface, like the hidden stitching of a well-made gown. You take your seat with practiced grace, nodding to your mother, who inspects your appearance with that keen maternal eye that always lands on your hair first. She says nothing, which, in this world, is the highest form of approval. Mainstream fact. In many Victorian households, breakfast was the only meal where the family gathered informally. Yet even here, appearances mattered. Women were expected to be dressed, groomed, and composed by the time they appeared at the table, no matter how early the hour, or how little sleep they'd had. Bed hair, a myth reserved for fiction. You pour your tea, stirring slowly, quietly. Across the table, your younger sister fidgets, with a curl that's already springing free from her side comb. She catches your glance and lets go, sliding her hand beneath the table, like a schoolgirl hiding evidence of a crime. You raise an eyebrow, just slightly. She's learning. The conversation over breakfast floats gently around the usual topics. Uncle Percival's gout, the latest society pages, an upcoming garden party that will absolutely feature someone fainting, and the elusive cousin who may or may not be involved in a questionable inheritance dispute. No one mentions hair, of course, but it's there, woven into every woman's silhouette like a silent badge of civility. You sip, listening, all the while aware of a subtle pressure developing behind your ears, a pair of pins, perhaps angled too steeply, now whispering a mild protest, not enough to cause pain, not yet, but enough to remind you that even your scalp has its limits. Quirky tidbit. Some Victorian women used miniature pincushions shaped like tiny heads to plan their styles in advance, spinning actual hairpieces and ribbons into them, like mannequins. Think of it as the 19th century version of a Pinterest board. Some of these were ornately decorated, with painted faces and porcelain skin. A bit eerie, perhaps, but terribly useful. Historians still argue whether Victorian breakfast rituals were genuinely familial, or merely another opportunity to rehearse propriety. Was it a space for shared warmth, or just another theater of poise? Certainly, within these rooms, rebellion rarely flourished. But beneath the surface of every polite bite of toast, there lingered 100 unsaid things. After breakfast, your father folds his newspaper with a sharp rustle, rising to disappear into the world of ledgers, and more ledgers. The men have their commerce, the boys have their Latin lessons, and you have a day of appearances. Today's agenda includes calling on an elderly neighbor, Miss Eberly, a woman whose hat is always 5 years out of date, but whose memory for fashion faux pas is alarmingly up to speed. A collapsed braid in her presence could mean whispers in 3 parishes by sundown. You return upstairs, adjusting the pins behind your ears, gently redistributing their tension. A minor reconfiguration, but vital. That's the thing about Victorian hairstyles. They're not sculptures. They're living, shifting systems. One pin's failure can collapse an entire design. There's no such thing as set it and forget it. You choose a hat, one wide-brimmed, and lightly adorned with silk violets. Not too heavy, not too tight, anything pressing too hard on your bun risks flattening it, and the angle must be precise. Not a millimeter off. You settle it atop your head, securing it with yet another pin, longer this time, one that runs like a secret bridge through the underlayers of your style, anchored invisibly. It's a marvel, really, how Victorian women became engineers of their own heads. You give yourself one final look in the mirror. The curls are smooth. The part is still centered. The hat doesn't disturb the line of your forehead. You are, for now, fully assembled. And just before you leave the room, a single hair drifts across your cheek. Of course it does. You blow it away with the softest puff of breath, too delicate to be seen by anyone but you. Then you open the door, stepping into the day with your head held high, not from pride, but because tilting it even slightly might upset everything. The street is quiet as your carriage pulls away, its wheels clicking over the cobblestones in a rhythmic, sleepy sort of music. You sit upright, gloved hands folded in your lap, the scent of violets from your hat mingling with the faint tenth of horse leather and polished brass. Your hair, still anchored in its braided coil, holds firm beneath your bonnet, though you feel every tiny jostle. A single sharp bump in the road sends a tremor through your spine, reminding you that even a perfect style exists at the mercy of potholes. Across from you sits your sister, whose curls have now made a full bid for freedom. One springs toward, her eyebrow like an enthusiastic question mark. She's blissfully unaware. You, however, find it hard to look away. Mainstream fact. Victorian ladies traveled not only with gloves and handkerchiefs, but with small on-the-go grooming kits, tucked discreetly into reticules, or bags where miniature mirrors, bone combs, and emergency hairpins, each item no larger than a matchstick. Some cases even had compartments for hair powder or scented oil. Because one never knew when a style might revolt. The carriage ride is mercifully short. Miss Everleigh's home, a genteel but slightly wilting brick house, awaits at the end of a curved lane. You step down with care, adjusting your skirts and smoothing the air around your head, as if that alone could secure your style. Your boots tap the stone path in measured beats, neither rushed nor leisurely, just the right pace for someone whose hair can't afford any sudden moves. You are welcomed into a parlor that smells of rosewater and biscuits. The furniture, a gentle battlefield of chintz and cat hair. Miss Everleigh greets you with her usual lopsided smile and her customary comment. "Ah, my dears. You both look very, arranged." You smile, curtsying slightly. "It's the morning wind," you say, which is code for, "We spent 47 minutes achieving this look, and we're not here to talk about it." Your sister stifles a giggle. Another curl bounces free. Tea is served. The conversation meanders between the usual topics. Someone's cousin's engagement, the unfortunate death of a horse named Marigold, the superiority of French lace over Nottingham. But through it all, you are hyper-aware of your hair. The pins behind your ear haven't budged, but you suspect the lower bun may be drooping slightly under the weight of the hat. You make a mental note to resecure it with a double-cross pin as soon as you're home. Quirky tidbit. In some circles, women swore by invisible anchoring, a secret technique of stitching hair into place with thread, not pins. This was especially common for elaborate styles worn to balls or weddings, when the idea of a bun collapsing mid-waltz was nothing short of catastrophic. Threads were matched to hair color, looped with a fine needle, and knotted discreetly inside coils. Entire updos were suspended like marionettes. Historians still argue whether Victorian women saw this kind of maintenance as a burden or an art form. Some diaries hint at pride women, noting the elegance of a style that withstood an entire promenade. Others reveal quiet frustration, aching scalps, headaches. The resentment of a social rule that treated natural hair texture as a problem too, be engineered away. Miss Everleigh, naturally, has opinions. "I do miss the ringlets we wore in the 40s, she muses, sipping her tea with a clink. "So romantic, so youthful. You girls today favor such architectural things." She gestures vaguely toward your head, like an architect pointing at a cathedral she doesn't fully understand. You smile and nod, offering a polite indeed. But inside, You're counting your hairpins again. You know exactly how many you placed 11, and you'll know if even one goes missing. The visit draws to a close. Farewells are exchanged, gloves are pulled back on, and once more you find yourself navigating the carriage steps with precision. Your sister tucks her rogue curls behind her ear, to no lasting effect. You don't mention it. She'll learn back. Inside the carriage, you remove your hat and perform a subtle check-no mirror. Just fingers and instinct. The braid is holding. The coil feels secure, but one side pin is loose. You slide it back into place with the finesse of someone who's done it 100 times without looking. You exhale slowly, outside the window. The town rolls by in quiet scenes. A boy chasing a hoop, a butcher sweeping his stoop, a milk cart leaving chalky tracks behind. Ordinary life, and through it all, your hair remains an invisible companion, a silent challenge you have, for now won. But it's only noon. By the time you return home, the sun has fully risen into its midday throne, casting that particular kind of light that makes everything feel too loud. The front door is opened by a footman, who pretends not to notice that you immediately reach up and remove a pin before even stepping over the threshold. It's the one that had been jabbing just behind your right ear for the past hour and a half, a subtle tormentor. Now disarmed, you glide up the stairs with a practiced pace, not because you are in any rush, but because the motion is carefully calibrated to avoid wind, jostle, or pin slippage. Each step is a ballet of balance. You reach your room, close the door softly, and let out the sigh that's been coiled in your chest like a spare ribbon. Finally, you can reassess. Mainstream fact. It wasn't uncommon for Victorian women to reset their hair at least once a day. A full morning style might begin to falter by lunchtime, especially if one had been outdoors, traveling, or, heaven forbid, caught in humidity. Afternoon retouching was simply part of life, just as corsets were adjusted and gloves exchanged. Hair was reevaluated with quiet urgency. You remove your hat, placing it carefully on its stand. You eye your reflection, tilting your head left, then right. The front still looks composed, but you know better. You reach for your brush and begin the diagnostic. Not to undo the entire stylo. No, but to troubleshoot, patch, realign. Think of it as triage. For the coiffed, a few of the front twists have loosened. The side coil has developed. A slight wobble, likely from leaning in too closely, while complimenting Miss Everleigh's inedible lemon cake. And the back bun, well, it hasn't failed, but it's sagging like an exhausted governess. Time for reinforcements. Quirky tidbit. Victorian women often repurposed sewing tools as hair maintenance instruments. Darning needles made excellent parting tools. Tiny embroidery scissors trimmed errant frizz. Thimbles were used to press hot tongs against stubborn curls without burning fingers, and hairpins, stored in sugar tins, matchboxes, even hollowed-out books, because hair, like war, is won with proper supplies. You work with silent efficiency, drawing out one section at a time, smoothing it with a bit of oil rubbed between your palms, and retwisting it into place. Your hands know the path. Your fingers have memory. This isn't styling anymore, it's cartography. You're retracing the shape of yourself. Historians still argue whether Victorian hair culture was more about beauty or discipline. Was it merely ornamentation, or was it a coded language? A message, carefully wrapped around the head, that said, I belong, or perhaps, I comply. Either way, the time women spent managing their hair is nearly immeasurable in the annals of personal history. Once the style is refreshed, tighter, cleaner, quieter, you reinsert your comb and mist a light spray of rosewater across the crown, smoothing down the wisps that had dared revolt. Not that you mind a wisp or two, but only at bedtime. Never in the full judging glare of day. You sit on the chaise by the window, catching your breath. It's strange, isn't it? The act of caring for your hair isn't inherently tiring, and yet the vigilance of it, the constancy, can wear on you like a second corset. One no one sees, but everyone expects. You let your eyes wander out the window for a while. The gardener is clipping hedges in perfect rhythm. A pair of children race hoops down the lane. And somewhere far off, a church bell tolls one. Afternoon is here. There's still so much day left. You smooth your skirts and rise again. Another visit awaits a seamstress this time. Then tea with the vicar's wife. Possibly another hat. Possibly a breeze that threatens everything you've just pinned back into place. You gather your parasol, check your gloves, and give your head the faintest, most imperceptible shake. Just to make sure nothing moves. It doesn't. You allow yourself a small smile. The second half of the day begins. The sun is high now, glinting off carriage roofs and curling heat through the railings as you make your way across town for your fitting. The milliner's shop sits tucked beside a bakery, both smelling faintly of starch and sugar, though your attention is more on the breeze that flutters around your ears. Not because it's refreshing, it isn't, but because it has the audacity to lift a strand of hair that you've just secured. You gently smooth it back with your gloved hand. Not enough to disturb the rest, but just enough to send a warning, a subtle negotiation. You walk on mainstream fact. The average Victorian woman owned at least 3 hats suitable for day wear, not counting those for church or evening occasions. But the true challenge wasn't buying hats, was wearing them without destroying your hairstyle. Hat pins, some over 10 inches long, were used not only for securing, but also for structural integrity. They became both fashion statements and minor weapons, sparking the famous and only half-joking hat-pin laws later in the Edwardian period. Inside the shop, the seamstress greets you with her usual wide smile and her arms full of ribbon. She's been expecting you, and more importantly, she's been expecting your hair. Because you are not just a client, you are a canvas, and your hairstyle dictates the color line. The hat tilt, the entire silhouette of your new ensemble. You are not dressed from the neck down. No, you are dressed from the scalp down. She takes your measurements again, not because they've changed, but because it's polite, because it buys her a moment to inspect your head without making it obvious. Her fingers hover near your nape, then your temple. She's mapping, mentally fitting the garment to a hairstyle you haven't even chosen yet for the next event. Quirky tidbit. Some dressmakers in the late Victorian era specialized in hair wear, tailoring, adjusting neckline height, and fastening positions to complement their clients' preferred styles. In some cases, they even stitched loops into the backs of dresses, where hairpieces could be anchored. It was a kind of secret architecture. Fashion and follicle in quiet alliance. The seamstress brings over a bonnet with a wide ribbon and asks you to try it on. You hesitate. Not because you dislike it, it's lovely, but because you already know it will interfere with your side braid. Still, you oblige. You lift it carefully, lower it with surgical precision, and tie the ribbon beneath your chin, and immediately, the coil shifts. Not much, just a hair, but you feel it, like a spider crawling across your scalp. You smile graciously and say, perhaps something with a slightly higher brim. She nods, unfazed. This is the dance you both know well. Style versus structure. Aesthetic versus physics. You remove the bonnet, carefully press the coil back into place with the heel of your hand, and move on. Historians still argue whether Victorian women viewed these compromises between fashion and practicality as empowering, creativity, or oppressive design. Some letters reveal frustration at always having to choose between comfort and convention. Others treat these adjustments like puzzles challenges that proved one's social fluency and personal flair. The fitting continues. You hold still as pins are tucked into fabric, measurements noted, suggestions made. If your hair will be worn up like this, the seamstress says, we may lower the collar slightly for symmetry. You nod, approving. This is the kind of exchange that never makes it into textbooks. But it shapes your life more than any royal decree. After an hour of posing, turning, adjusting, and smiling at your reflection with the polite detachment of someone viewing a painting of themselves, you're finally free. The pins are removed from the fabric, your parasol is returned, and you step back out into the heat. The hem of your dress, gathering dust and good intentions as it brushes the pavement. You head toward the next engagement tea with Mrs. Hawthorne, who, according to gossip, has recently grown suspicious of her own hairdresser's intentions. Too many compliments, she said last week in a whisper. No one praises a chignon with that much passion without ulterior motives. You stifle a smile at the memory and quicken your pace just slightly. You've earned a small luxury before the next round of sitting and smiling and head tilting. So you detour down a quiet lane to the sweet shop, the one with lavender sugar cubes and candied violets. Inside, it's blissfully cool, dim, and empty. As you order, you catch your reflection in a mirrored candy case. The hairstyle is still intact, elegant, smooth, symmetrical. But something is different. You lean in, a curl, loose at the temple, soft, rebellious, beautiful. You hesitate, then let it stay, just for now. By late afternoon, the sky has turned the soft gray of stretched linen, and the town exhales a collective sigh as heat gives way to breeze. You return home with a small paper parcel of candied violets tucked neatly into your reticule, their gentle perfume trailing behind you like a whisper. Your gloves are off, your hat rests at a safer tilt, and your steps are slightly slower, now not from fatigue, but from a deep desire not to disturb the architecture of your head as you climb the stairs. Once more, you pass a mirror in the hallway and, as always, glance without seeming to. The rebellious temple curl still hangs like a secret, but now it's joined by a faint softness at the nape and inevitable loosening. Your hair, too, is beginning to feel the weight of the day. Mainstream fact: Victorian hairstyles were built to last, but they weren't indestructible. Heat, moisture, and motion were constant adversaries. While hair products did exist, pomades, waxes, rosewater sprays, they were rarely enough to carry a style from dawn until dusk. Women were often expected to reset their hair again before dinner, especially if guests were expected, or if the evening called for a different mood, more elegant, more romantic, or simply less tightly wound. You slip into your room and close the door with a quiet click. The house hums gently below, Uzumon tuning a pianoforte, the maid lighting fresh tapers, footsteps padding across carpet. You set your things down and approach your dressing table. Time for the second unraveling. This is not like the ritual before bed, slow and dreamlike. This one is functional, efficient in deconstruction before reconstruction. You reach up and remove the hat pin first, then the smaller pins tucked into the braid. One by one, you feel them release their grip, tiny sighs against your scalp. It's almost a pleasure, almost quirky tidbit. Some women named their pins. Truly. Not every pin, of course, but a select few. The stubborn one, the savior, the widowmaker. There were pins that held better than they should, pins that always disappeared, pins inherited from mothers and aunts that seemed to carry their own personality. It wasn't superstition. It was familiarity born from daily battle. You run your fingers through your hair, gently coaxing it loose. The braid has left faint waves, and where the pins were, tiny dents now live, like footprints in a field. You massage your scalp for a moment, just long enough to restore circulation, to remind your head that it belongs to you again. Historians still argue whether this constant choreography of hair was an act of oppression or of power. Was this daily styling a submission to male expectations, or was it the one domain where a woman had full control? A realm of quiet autonomy, manipulated with care, creativity, and persistence. Like so many things, the truth likely lies in the tension between the two. You brush slowly now, longer strokes that glide from root to tip, smoothing away the day's creases. Your arms tired before your hair does, and so you switch sides, brushing with your left hand and laughing softly to yourself, as you realize, yet again, that grooming is a workout. And then comes the decision. What style for dinner? It's not a formal meal tonight, no guests, no callers, no cousins hoping to arrange subtle engagements. But still, you are expected to appear put together. And so you choose a simpler style, a single chignon, low at the nape, with a few wisps curled just slightly for softness. It's easier, but not lazy. It says, I am at home, but I still care. You part your hair against center, of course, and twist the front strands back, securing them loosely. The back is combed into a rope and coiled, then pinned with just 5 carefully chosen soldiers from your now dwindling supply. You'll need to retrieve the others from coat linings and the carriage floor later. For now, these 5 will do. You slide in a pearl-tipped comb knot, because anyone will see it. But because it makes the style feel complete, It's for you. A quiet indulgence. The clock chimes downstairs. You rise, smooth your dress, and tilt your head gently to test for movement. Everything holds. And so, with your head once again assembled, your spine straightened by ritual and pins, you descend to dinner. You do not think about your hair as you walk into the dining room. That's the true measure of success. Dinner is, in the grand scheme of things, uneventful. A pot roast of reliable temperament, slightly overboiled carrots, and polite conversation that rolls in waves of small, safe subjects. The weather, the vicar's new dog. The rumor that Miss Calthorpe may have purchased a velvet settee. But even as you sit there with your hands folded just so, and your smile adjusted to a perfect 47-degree angle of interest, you're awakeningly aware of your hair, not because it's misbehaving. On the contrary, it is remarkably holding. The chignon you assembled in the fading light of your bedroom has settled into something almost serene. A little looser than morning's braid, yes, but with a softness that says, I've been through the day and am still here. It's not presentation, it's presence. Mainstream fact. Evening hair was rarely the same as morning hair. It was considered both practical and proper to restyle before dinner. Before dinner, especially if there had been a change of dress. But even in households without strict formality, hair was expected to reflect the shift in tone. No woman was to be seen at the supper table, looking as if she'd just returned from a fox hunt, even if, in truth, all she'd battled was a stubborn curl. You sip your tea after the meal, the delicate floral china warming your fingers. Across the table, your sister catches your eye and gives a slight nod of approval. Her own hair has been reworked into a loose plait, one that somehow makes her look younger. Though you suspect it took her half an hour to achieve that effortless look, you return the nod. Silent solidarity, quirky tidbit. Some women slept in what they called transitional styles. Half-styles worn in the evening that looked elegant by lamplight, but also doubled as protective arrangements for overnight. A loose twist here, a hidden pin there, and voila. What looked like a romantic evening coif was actually the scaffolding for tomorrow's braidwaves. Ingenious and lazy in equal measure. The conversation continues. The cat has ruined another rug. The grocer's son has taken up sketching faces from the market. Someone insists that salt will soon be taxed again. Through it all, your hairstyle, persistent because of vanity, but because it has become the quiet scaffold of your composure. It's not the centerpiece of the room, nor would you want it to be, but it holds your spine a little straighter, keeps your chin at the right height, helps you feel ... contained. Historians still argue whether Victorian dining rituals were communal bonding or rehearsals and performance. Certainly, for women, the table was not a break from the pressures of appearance. It was merely a different stage. Slouching was frowned upon. Hair touching, of course, was unthinkable. Even laughter had a volume range. After dessert table tarts, with too much clove you rise and excuse yourself. You feel the weight of your hair begin to shift with your movement, the chignon, now just a little too aware of gravity. You wonder if you'll need to pin it again before bed, or simply let it go. You return to your room, closing the door with a quiet finality that feels like exhaling. The room is cooler, now shadows stretching along the floor. You light a candle with a practiced flick of the taper, watching the flame settle into its flickering rhythm. You remove the pearl comb, first your small indulgence, then the pins. Each one slips free with a soft tick, like a sigh. You lay them in their dish on the vanity. 5 tiny soldiers, retired once more. Then the uncoiling begins. Slowly, gently, the rope of hair unwinds into a cloud. Strands loosening into freedom with every pass of your fingers. You close your eyes and just feel it, the weight, the warmth. The little tug where a pin had nestled too long, and there. In the mirror, you see yourself again, not the version who curtsied to Miss Everly, or nodded at the seamstress, or smiled through supper, but the unpinned you. The you without scaffold. And you look tired, but whole. With the final pin removed, and the last coil of hair unfurled like a ribbon across your shoulders, you take a deep breath and lean back slightly in your chair. The silence of your room seems different, now thicker, softer. as though the day itself has drawn a curtain across its last scene. You reach for your hairbrush, the one with the smooth wooden handle and worn boar bristles, and begin the slow, methodical strokes that mark the beginning of your nightly descent. Each brushstroke pulls not only through the strands, but through the hours, removing the small knots of tension, the snags of conversation, the faint tangles of things left unsaid. The brush glides through like a gentle metronome, counting down the seconds to sleep. Mainstream fact. Victorian women were instructed to brush their hair nightly exactly 100 times, or so the etiquette guides claimed. It wasn't just grooming. It was ritual, believed to promote shine, circulation, and feminine reflection. The nightly brushing was seen as essential to both beauty and morality. To neglect your hair at night was almost akin to neglecting your soul, or at least your social standing. You're not sure you count each stroke. Who has the time, honestly? But you do fall into a rhythm. 20, 30, 40. The bristles whisper through the strands, making the sound of leaves being gathered in slow motion. The oil from your scalp begins to distribute, giving your hair a subtle sheen. You pause only when your arm tires, then switch hands. Quirky tidbit. Some women used hair receivers, porcelain or silver containers, shaped like little pots with a hole in the lid, to collect strands that came out during brushing. These hairs were later used to make rats, cushions of hair used to pad out updos, adding volume. So in a way, your own hair became a building block for tomorrow's style. Recycled elegance. You gently part your hair into sections, braiding each side loosely. Not tight enough to leave creases, but enough to keep the strands from knotting in your sleep. The movements are slower now. Your fingers fumble slightly, not from lack of skill, but from the drowsiness that is beginning to pool at the edges of your mind. Historians still argue whether the Victorian obsession with nightly grooming was a tool of control or an escape. Was it an extension of daytime pressure, or a quiet reclaiming of time? A few private moments when a woman could focus solely on herself without interruption. Diaries reveal both perspectives. Some women described brushing as a chore. Others wrote of it as meditation. You fasten the end of the braid with a small ribbon, then do the same to the other side. You don't bother to make them perfectly even. No one will see. The asymmetry is oddly comforting. A tiny rebellion before bed. You change into your nightdress, its fabric light and soft against your skin. With the fire burned low, and your candle flickering beside the bed, the room takes on the muted warmth of a sepia photograph. You glance once more at your reflection, not to judge but to acknowledge. This is you, the end-of-day version, quiet, unstructured, free. You lie back against the pillow, your braids resting beside your neck, and pull the quilt over your body with a sigh. The bed is cool, but not cold. You feel your body sink into the mattress, muscles unwinding like your hair did only minutes before. And in this final moment, before the candle is snuffed, before sleep comes, you think briefly of the women before you. The ones who brushed, pinned, coiled, and carried their days in hair that never truly rested. You smile, because tomorrow, you'll do it all again, but not yet. Tonight, the world is soft, and so are you. You wake before the sun does. That gray-blue moment where the world isn't fully awake, but somehow you are. There's no bustle outside the window, yet just the distant creak of timbers and the faint chirp of a brave bird testing the air. The braids at either side of your head have held through the night, though one has slipped halfway loose and now looks more like a twist of seaweed than anything socially acceptable. Still, it served its purpose. You stretch beneath the covers, slowly, arms above your head like a cat, uncoiling after a long nap. And for a few luxurious seconds, you don't think about your hair. You just exist. Mainstream fact. Victorian women often rose before the rest of the household, not to meditate or read poetry under the windowsill, though that did happen in novels, but to get a head start on grooming, with all the layers of garments, the lacing, the perfume, and, of course, the architecture of the hair. Getting ready could take over an hour. Add sisters, maids, and limited mirror space into the mix, and you suddenly understand why some women opted for sleep-in styles, or servants with exceptional hairpin memory. You sit up, reaching for the brush on your bedside table. This one's smaller than the evening brush, softer bristled made for detangling. You begin to undo your sleep braids, the hair now kinked in gentle waves, like ripples from a tossed pebble. You finger through the strands, slow and tender, half awake. There's something calming about the quiet snags, and the way they give in, one by one. Quirky tidbit. In some households, hair was a morning ritual, shared by sisters or cousins, particularly those close in age. They would take turns brushing and braiding each other's hair, gossiping about upcoming dances, or sharing scraps of poetry they'd memorized in secret. It was bonding, yes, but also strategy. You'd need someone to spot your uneven parting, or secure the one tricky twist that always tried to escape. You rise, pat across the room in slippered feet, and open the wardrobe. Today's dress is simpler cotton, pale lilac, with a high neck, and modest lace at the sleeves. A no visitors expected sort of day, though of course, someone always manages to call when you're least prepared, at the dressing table. The real work begins. The brush moves with greater purpose now. The waves from your braid are coaxed into smoother sections, parted with a bone comb, then swept back from your forehead with care. You hum to yourself, not a song exactly, just a sound to fill the space. You apply a small touch of oil to the ends of your hair, massaging it in with fingertips. Your scalp thanks you. Historians still argue whether these long grooming rituals were chosen or enforced. But today, in this moment, it doesn't feel like oppression. It feels like crafting, like a slow ritual of self-assembly. You're not putting on a mask, you're building a scaffold, a frame for the day ahead. You've decided on a braided crown, today wrapped around the top of your head. Neat and out of the way, functional, elegant, and less likely to collapse if a breeze sneaks through the drawing room window. You begin with a central part, working the braid from behind one ear, slowly curving it upward and across. You anchor it with 2 pins, then a third for insurance. Always 3. You pause, tilt your head to check the symmetry. It's not perfect, but it's close. You slide in your favorite side comb, not for the look, but for the story. A gift from your aunt on your 12th birthday, carved from horn and polished so smooth it still catches light like water. You wear it on quiet days, like this. Days where small comforts matter. Downstairs, you can hear movement. Footsteps, a kettle rattling faintly. Morning has arrived. You do one last sweep with the brush, checking for flyways, and exhale. You're ready, hair coiled, pins secured, shoulders back. The day can begin. The day unfolds with the kind of slow calm that rarely announces itself in advance. There are no surprise callers, no urgent messages scrawled in rushed graphite. Just the steady rhythm of ordinary life, pages turning, clocks ticking, teacups chiming gently against saucers, and you, moving through it all with the quiet grace of someone whose hair is, for once, cooperating. You sit by the window for a while, darning a glove that's lost a bit of its finger. The braid crown sits firm atop your head, secured so well it feels almost like a natural extension of your scalp. You hardly notice it anymore. It doesn't tug or weigh or shift. It simply is. An unspoken victory, and one that requires no applause. Mainstream fact. Victorian women learned to internalize these small triumphs of grooming, presentation, and social poise without expectation of acknowledgement. It was not seen as a skill to master, but as a baseline of womanhood. Hair, in particular, was treated like a living accessory, curated, shaped, maintained, yet it was rarely complimented in public, unless you were very young, or very ill, or about to be married. The afternoon light slants in golden across the floor, catching in the fine strands near your temple. You can feel the warmth of it. Not enough to loosen a braid, but enough to make you drowsy. You allow yourself a brief nap, just 20 minutes. Nothing scandalous, and wake to the same peaceful quiet, your hair still intact. Quirky tidbit. In some circles, women swore that the way you slept affected your hairstyle's lifespan. Sleeping, on one side, but not too deeply, preserved buns. Sleeping on your back could flatten curls. Some even devised small hair pillows, oval-shaped bolsters that cradled the neck, while allowing hair to float untouched. They weren't comfortable, but they worked. Later in the day, you find yourself in the garden, shears in hand, clipping dried blooms from the roses. Your hairstyle is still pristine, but now it doesn't feel like a costume. It feels like ... you an external shape that finally matches the quiet confidence within. There's no stiffness in your posture, no ache at your temples. You move without worry. The comb doesn't slip. The braid doesn't sag. Historians still argue whether Victorian ideals of beauty were more restrictive than empowering. They question whether women internalized these standards as identity or as burden. But when you consider this particular moment yourself, alone, at ease, with a hairstyle holding firm and the wind tugging playfully at your hemmet, doesn't feel like either. It feels like something else. Something simpler, familiar. You return. Indoors as twilight begins to settle in, the sky bruising gently at the edges. The fire is lit early. You prepare a small supper cheese bread, a slice of pear, and enjoy it, in silence, not out of sadness, but satisfaction. There's nothing that needs saying tonight. Nothing that hasn't already been combed through, pinned down, and released. Again, and as the hours stretch forward into softening candlelight, you climb the stairs to your room once more. Your fingers automatically reach for the pins, already knowing their places, their textures, their tiny grumbles of resistance. They come loose one by one. You unbraid, uncoil, undo. Not because you're trying to shed something, but because it's time. The hair falls down like a curtain at the end of a play, and you step off the stage with a smile. The house is quiet now. The world is quiet, and so are you.